This Passover, our seder table will welcome Egyptian Slave Barbie. It doesn't have to be Barbie, even though Barbie's mother, Ruth Handler, was Jewish. But any doll will do so long as it reminds us of a slave. Take its shoes off, dress it in rags, whatever. It's your slave. But the doll can remind us that the Egyptians were slaves who never knew what hit them. Of course, there is about as much evidence for an historical Moses as there is for an historical Batman. But we're the Jews, the world's most obsessive, compulsive book club. Work with me. In our book, the men, women, and children of Egypt had been enslaved centuries earlier by Donny Osmond. Joseph. They were the property of Pharaoh, the Goldman Sachs of his day. The Egyptian slaves had never heard of Israel's God. Pharaoh had never heard of Israel's God.
I do not know your God.
I do not know this God.
The God I do not know, have never heard of.
Imagine some Canadian running to Obama saying, "The flying spaghetti monster says, let your nuclear weapons go." Obama would be like, all the Egyptian slaves knew was that suddenly the water was undrinkable, like in Flint, Michigan. Bugs were everywhere, frogs were all over the place, everybody was getting boils, weather was messed up, Facebook was down. It was a catastrophe. You can imagine starving families running from their burning shacks, pelted by fiery hail, wondering, what the fuck? Not that the answer would have been satisfying. You are suffering because a God you do not know wants to show people you have never met that he is the most brutal of the deities you cannot see. The Israelites didn't know what was going on either. Unlike U.S. Negro slaves, the Israelites didn't have to organize or fight for their freedom. They just had to sit back and watch the action movie. Of course, even we Jews don't tell any stories about the Israelites helping out their suffering Egyptian slave neighbors. There was no Israelite Schindler. But we do say that Yahweh softened the hearts of the Egyptians and turned them into zombie philanthropists.
Yes, Israel, take what you want. Give it back to us when the Cubs win the World Series.
Says me, spilling a few drops of wine does not come close to reminding us what the plagues did to the rest of Egypt's slaves, which was everybody. At our seder, after the wine dripping, we'll pass around Egyptian Barbie, or G.I. Joe, or whomever, and borrowing from Pope Francis, who sometimes wears a yarmulke making him Jew-ish, pour water over the feet of the doll as a gesture of humility in the face of the huge price those other slaves paid for Israelite freedom. You could do it too. Get a doll or doll feet or whatever you identify with as Egyptian slave feet. Get all empathetic and humble about Pesach. This Passover, let's not pass over the Egyptian slaves.